All right, guys. My name is Dr. Sharnael Wolverton Sehan with SwiftFire.org, True TV. Super, super excited this evening, afternoon-ish on a Sunday to have Tony Rodrigues with us today. I'm going to make sure our settings are correct very quickly, and why I'm doing that, if you guys could please tell me where you are from, then I can see. Do I see the comments? Let's see. View comments. No, that's not what I want to do. Comments. I'd love to. For one thing, it's not public yet. Let's fix that. Then maybe people will. Okay, now we're public. Awesome. And now they're rolling in. If you guys could just tell me where you're from while we're getting set up real quick. Tony, super happy to have you. What an honor.
Thank you.
To have you with us. I have been talking to him for about off and on, I don't know, 8 weeks, not 10 weeks ish. Time flies when you're in our season. My time clock has been broken a long time anyway, but just trying to get this together, and then talking to him about just some of my own things. He's kind of helped me sort some things out, and just he came up on my radar actually through James Ring or Rink, depending on somehow talking to him or something. I think he's friends with him on Facebook or something, and I started seeing some of his posts and what have you, and then talked to a few others who have he's been on their show, and so I've never heard his actual real full testimony. I've read it, and it's pretty intriguing and interesting, and we have a lot of things, but he's helped me go through some of the things, just with a couple phone calls that we've had. It's just like to talk to somebody who kind of can get it a little bit is always helpful, just to not feel like a total crazy person. But so Tony,
I know the feeling.
Do you? Well, hopefully you have some people too that can kind of listen in, and you help a lot of people in this situation now. I mean, that's your mission. It's become part of
Seems
your.
that way. Mm-hmm.
So tell us a little bit about your background. Like, I mean, we could be here a long time with everything, but tell us your story.
So I was involved early on in life, about 10 years old, with a what is referred to by many as a 20 and back, or a 20-year tour in the secret space program, or in a satellite program off of Black Ops of a secret space program. And I was taken, and a phenomenon of the technology that both the U.S. government and many governments around the world have acquired from dealing with extraterrestrials, life extension technology that they've had, is to take people and be able to make them live parallel timelines for about 20 years in 20-year increments, and then return them back to the moment that they were taken, pretty much, and then reinsert them back into their lives. So, man, it's hard to explain. It's a mouthful, and then erase their memories, and they go back to their life a little bit different than what they were, and carry on. And this is one of the things that happens when people are abducted. That we always hear the abduction story. You always hear about somebody that, I was driving down the road and my car stalled, and all of a sudden I saw some grays, and then I don't remember what happened after that. And I woke up and I'm a little bit different. I don't know. And then I came home, and you hear that's the story time and time again. And what happened to me was, along those lines, I was taken out of my bedroom at night, and but I lived for 20 years, and during that time, I lived on Earth for six or 8 years of that time, and then was sold off into the space programs, to space colonies that are in our solar system that people have colonized over the last 100 years. And so they're classified as corporations, like the Mars Colony Corporation, the Ceres Colony Corporation. And I served there, and I worked on a few interstellar craft as a skilled laborer, and served the rest of my time up there until I was returned. When I got back, I had no memory of what happened. I had flashbacks and snippets, basically memories all along my whole life. And then I had an MRI done, a scan of my head in April of 2015, or April, May. And in early May, about 2 weeks later, I got big chunks of the memories came back. And so I got my memories back. And also, in 2015, there were a few other guys that were coming forward saying the same thing, same experience. Although it was a lot different for them, I was kind of taken into a program that was cobbled together. Um, I wasn't groomed for it. A lot of people that are taken into the My Labs and these programs are groomed their whole life for it. I wasn't. I was just kind of a bystander and in the wrong place at the wrong time and taken. And so I got a great deal, not all of my memories, there's a lot I don't remember, but I got a great deal of memories back compared to the average person that goes through these programs and has a few snippets of memories. And I worked with some researchers in the beginning because I wanted some counseling. I wanted someone else to talk to. I had nobody to talk to. And agreed to do an interview, and one led to another, led to another. And 5 years later, I've done quite a few interviews. I've been on a few programs. And what I found is that I've had a few thousand people reach out to me that have memories of kind, along the same lines, or at least of some kind of contact. So it wasn't just that a few dozen people. I mean, we're talking a few thousand people. So it led me to generate. I have a channel, and it led me to generate my website, which is TonyRodrigues.com. And that has I couldn't keep up with everybody. So it has a course on there for memory retrieval, or at least a beginner's course, somewhere to start for people that are going through the same thing, which sadly there's a market for. And then I have a Patreon channel and links to other interviews that I've done that I put up there. So it got to be a little bit too much to keep up with everybody at once. So I was fortunate to make some friends with Jacqueline Pierce, who I do my talks with, and is a very talented person, and she helped me set up the website. So it's kind of where I'm at now.
Yeah, so we can go a million directions, but so when you first were taken out of your bedroom at 10 years old, was it actual people who took you, or are you talking about?
It was your standard gray
Okay.
ET that I woke up in my room and had him standing there, and there were shorter reptilians that came in and picked me up out of bed and carried me out into a flash, like a portal device, and a flash of light. And I woke up in a laboratory, and they did medical experiments. They tested me. They did like a biopsy, and they tested me, my genetics, to see if I was compatible for what they wanted to do. There was communication. They spoke with me telepathically and asked me questions. They interacted. I was overjoyed. I thought that this was first contact. I was a kid that was into sci-fi, and I thought it was first contact, so I agreed to help them. And there was a procedure, and I lost consciousness, and I woke up, and I was in a hospital in California, and I was thrown into what I found out. I've been able to find funding and paper trail of a program. Basically was an offshoot of Project Center Lane by the CIA, Project Grill Flame funded, and we were kind of like an offshoot of that, and we were used originally for remote viewing.
Wow. Wow. So is this having anything to do with China Lake then, or is this something completely separate?
I'm sorry, with what?
With China Lake? Was this underground or is this above ground?
It was above ground, and it was Inyokern Air Base, just west of China Lake. And in fact, when I finished that program, they took us to a facility in China Lake, and I rode an underground high-speed train to Montana, and I was picked up by somebody. There was a billionaire that owned us privately, a few of us kids, and they were using us for remote viewing, like channeling. They would drug us and bring us, like a near-death experience, and they were able to ask us questions and channel other entities to speak through us, I believe, and
wow,
have access to future and past events. Like they had their own psychic kids. They were, it was very accurate, I guess, for kids. And this is where I found a lot of evidence that's where the Stanford Research Institute went. They were dealing with near death experiences with children, and this was it. the evidence I found later after I recovered my. Now, the other thing is, so when you say things like this, people go, "Well, where's the proof?"
Right.
And what happened was I was fortunate because in 2015 there were a lot of people saying a lot of things publicly that if you got these memories back, you had some sort of access to a secret space program memories, and then came forward. You had nothing to really prove your case because somebody else had said it publicly. And so in the beginning, I was kind of fortunate that I was on the very tail end of that. So some of the things I remembered, I was able to share with researchers that hadn't been publicly shared yet by other people that to corroborate, if I said that word right. And so I was able to accurately depict some things that other people confirmed later, and that's kind of why I got the interviews in the first place, and why I was able to basically substantiate some of the things that I said. And since then, so many of the things that I went on record saying back then that couldn't be substantiated, many of them have panned out. So when I've looked into the program, I've looked into Grill Flame, and I've instead of finding things to prove me wrong, I keep finding things that support my testimony. So I have to trust that if my memories of the time on the planet were so accurate during that time, and mind you, the entire time I had a pretty big family. I'm the youngest of 5 kids. Mom and dad were together all then. And throughout that time, I had plenty of witnesses to say in my regular life, my organic life, that I've never been to Seattle. And so there's no way that I could know my way around there. But unfortunately, I went there in 2016. After this, I found the house online on Google Earth, and I went there. And I knew the house, I knew the stores nearby, I knew the beach down the road. I knew the area. I had great memories, accurate memories of the area. So much so that I had even recognized things that had been built up since then. I'm like, wow, that's new. And so that was really stamped because I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to believe all this stuff either. I was looking for a way out, like what is going on here? I wanted something. When I was talked to somebody, I was like, please prove me wrong, because it was kind of a heavy cross to bear. It's a tall ledge to leap from, to believe that you've been involved with these things. And so when I went to Seattle and literally everything panned out exactly how I remembered it, then I had to entertain the space memories too, which I'm happy to say that recently, back in 2015, I had been questioned greatly about the series, the Okator crater. I'm saying that right? Okator, the crater that has the white spots on Ceres. And I remember we did a flyby back in the late 90s on one of the craft that I worked on, and there was a geyser that was going off for a couple days. There's a geyser there, and the water would shoot up about 10, 11 kilometers and then evaporate, and salt and minerals would snow back, and that's what the white spots are on Ceres. And when the Dawn probe got there in 2016, they nationally originally said that it was a cocktail of minerals, and I said no, it's salt. It's basically salt and a little bit of magnesium. That's what I was told as I was flying over it, looking out the window at the geyser going off right up close. That crater is like 50 miles wide. And just recently, last summer, I think it was in August or so, NASA published the results of the Dawn probe, and they confirmed that it was indeed salt. So that was something that I called out in 2015 and 2016, and it was proven right. So that was very vindicating for me. So that was, substantiates my testimony of my time and space. The other thing is the flight path. I went back and got a map of Ceres. The flight path that I originally drew over that crater, I'd drawn it out that we had gone from basically left to right, also connects to where I said the hangar was. And I found that out after the fact. So I had memories of flying over that crater in a certain direction. And then months later, I came across a map, and it would be the direction you would fly if you were heading back to where I also identified the hangar entrance to be as well.
Well, and I get the whole part about credibility for others to see you as credible when you're sharing, and then no one else knows. And so you're just validating what they've already heard or interviewed from other people or other kids or other adults. But at the same time, there's something to be said about when some of these things come back, like you said, and you're surprised that you're like, oh my God, see, there's another thing. Cause I get that you want to be wrong. I totally get you. Cause you're like, this can't be right. But then you hear someone that you've never talked to before, or you read something and you're like, oh my God, or it triggers a memory or a flash of something. And then you start hearing 5 or 6 people saying the same thing. And you're like, oh my God. Like, and I had told a few people, just my close friends. And then, so I get that. I totally, even some of the things that you've said just now, I'm like, oh my God, that's another thing. Like, so it's interesting how you can talk to some other people, and you do want to be wrong, but you also, it's like a relief too, in a way, because you feel like you're not a crazy person.
Right.
You know what
Absolutely.
I mean? It's like
yes.
You're really pissed off and sad that it's happened and that you're right, but you're also like relieved that you're right.
There's a cycle that, experiencing it the way that I have and the way I've told it. There was a cycle, first of disbelief, of great memories. When I got the memories back, I knew that it was more. I mean, we're talking about decades of memories, and memories of interpersonal relationships, memories of friends, of lovers, of fights, of bad, abuse, horrible things. And so there was a lot of memories, and that just those first few days of remembering that was like hard to internalize.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the kind of a first step. But then after that, I got to the point where, what do I do with this?
Mm-hmm.
What, there have been people that have suggested that it was, I was programmed in order to start some kind of disinfo. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's great. I should be talking about that too, because who could program somebody with an extra 20 years of memories? Why would you do that? What is the result of me speaking about this? Really? What is the change that's happening in the world because I've come forward? Really nothing. So it seems like a lot of problems to go through to take somebody and put them, you get what I mean? Like it's a lot of effort for a small result. I don't think that the people with had access to that kind of technology would bother. So there was that realization, like, what do I do now? And I didn't want to take it to the grave with me. I didn't want to die and then be laying there on my deathbed, go, I should have told somebody about what I remember. And so I did, and I started to talk about it. And then what happened was I started to reprove it to myself, because again, it's hard to swallow. It's hard to believe, even with my memories. Like when you tell somebody about flying in a ship over seas, I actually have the mental image of flying in a ship over seas. Like I can smell the place. After that, it's kind of like there's a realization that not only, okay, so I have to go with it, that happened, but not only that, but that means that our world that we live in is nothing that we believe it is. That means that the construction of government, the way that everybody believes, everything that we are living is a lie.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because we are in the dark ages. We are back in the 1800s, man, with the horse and carriage compared to what these people were living where I was. And so if that's the case, then what's going on here? Like now I'm kind of in that position where, and it just kind of organically unfolded where people started to reach out to me like, look, I remember it too. I get memory. Like, thanks, man, for coming forward, Tony, you're great, but I have memories. What do I do with it? And I get those all the time, constantly. And there's really nothing I can do. There's not a silver bullet where I can help somebody remember more or deal with anything. And I've heard terrible stories. I hear a lot of things that I frankly can't believe, but that doesn't mean nothing happened. So I'm not that guy to disprove anybody. I get stories and I go, wow, like that's a lot. Whoa, I don't remember anything like that, but that doesn't mean it's not real. So the reality is, because of what I remember and because the things that I remember have checked out, that we have to entertain everything that some people say. We have to entertain those thoughts. Do you get what I mean? Because everything is based on we are kept greatly in the dark. Not only just a little bit in the dark, but a lot.
Yeah, educationally, technology wise, medically, space, galaxies,
Everything.
Yeah, and then there's these programs from school and up, to give you only the information they want you to have, because perception comes from information. So if their information is the only information you get, whether it's being withheld or just disinformation, that your perception is where it is. And then they use other people who all have that perception to keep all those people in line with that perception. So if you have anything that's outside of it, they don't even have to do anything to you, because the people who are in that frame of mind can be the policers of what you're crazy or this or that, so it becomes a peer pressure type situation.
I think that a lot of things recently, so obviously we all know that the world we live in, especially, I don't know if people from out of the country, but in the United States, people, our last year, a few years that we've had have been unlike others, and people are polarized on one side or the other. I can see you've got Donald Trump in the background there. So people are polarized, and so many people have been influenced to think negatively about the president, that anytime they were presented with data or some, you know what I mean? Like something from the opposite. I think we're to the point now where people are so afraid of being embarrassed that they can't change their mind, that instead of accepting new information, they just become angry. And you get what I mean? Like we don't have political discussions anymore. It goes from zero to a fight, unless you agree right off the bat. It goes from zero to a shouting match. There's no back and forth. There used to be, but I think people are so heavily emotionally invested now. They've turned up the emotions involved, that you're so afraid of being embarrassed by saying that you're wrong about anything, and vice versa. It doesn't matter what side. People are so afraid of being embarrassed that they will immediately just get violent
and defend. People will defend and fight for that program. I mean, when my memory started coming back, I have to be honest, I had something I didn't have. Are you saying an MRI is a thing that makes it happen? As you mentioned the MRI.
Look, so I always mention the MRI because there was a guy named Michael Ralph that came forward, and he published the Mars records, and he after getting an MRI scan of his head recalled memories of a service on Mars. He did the same thing, like 20 back on Mars. I was a year into my account of dealing with researchers before I found that out, and I went, wait a minute, I got an MRI, and I was able to go online and look at my medical records, and lo and behold, it was exactly 2 weeks before I began to email people, researchers, because I got my memories back all in one shot. And I went, wow, what a coincidence, right? So another guy did. So I always mention the MRI. That doesn't mean that that's the cure. It's just I want to be clear that it may have been, but it was coincidentally the same 2 weeks that I got the bulk of my memories back. I did have a scan. I went to the doctor. I was having headaches, and it was probably because I needed glasses. You know what I mean? Like I needed reading glasses, and but I was having really bad headaches for a long time. And she said, "We better get you just checked out. Go down and get an MRI." And I did. So, and then 2 weeks later, I remembered a 20 and back.
Wow.
So it may have something to do. It may not. It may be a coincidence. But I always present that out there because, I like to give everything that I remember as best I can, because I really don't know what's the scope of everything that's gone on either. Right. I don't know. There's a lot I don't know,
Well, and then from what I've studied and what I understand a little bit is, when they use the different drugs to wipe or swipe or, make you not remember, there's different ones that they've used and can use. And they're supposed to be, they want it to be 100%, but for some, I think there's like 5% or less that it doesn't work on at all, or they're
3%. About 3% of the blank slate. So the other thing is, I was in the early 80s, and from other people that have come forward, we found out that they've really changed the process, that they've gotten better at it. So people that are taken in the early 80s, you have more people that get their memories back versus people that are taken in the late 90s, because they've really gotten better with the technology of blank slating.
And then there's the seep through type thing too, where it can go, maybe a decade or two. There's like a time clock on it where you start to like bleed through and the memories start to come through. Go ahead.
That's what they found, is that people that have, some researchers have found that everybody that's come forward, myself, Michael Ralph, Randy Kramer, other guys that have come forward. It's usually after the 20 years. So they go on a 20-year tour, then come back and then live another 20 years. And then it was 30 years later.
Oh.
I was in my 30s when I was in my late 30s when, no, what, 15. So, 40 years old already. It was quite a long time after I experienced it that I got my memories back.
Interesting. That's wow. And then some people it doesn't work at all. Like, so, and actually, to be honest, even if you're not drugged and blank slated, this is common with sexual abuse as well. For people who have had problems, or been molested or raped at an early age, they can, you split, you can block it off, and then we just with counseling and different things, or maybe some trigger can come through, or a dream. You might have like a nightmare where it's reoccurring, and you think that it's a dream, but I'm working with these people who do scalar waves. And they are able to tell if it actually really happened. And they used an event, a specific example where they had used it with this one girl and found out that her dreams were not dreams, that they had really happened. So I said, well, can you do that with anything? And they actually tested me and with multiple things, and it came back that it happened. And then also I did a natal chart. I mean, you wouldn't think that this would show up, but it actually showed up in the natal chart of during that time from 3 to 6 specifically, high electricity, high technology, time travel, and it's like, this lady doesn't know anything about me. And she's just like, oh yeah, the Uranus was in here and blah, blah, blah. So that usually means a lot of electricity, a lot of time channel. Pluto was here. So it's like dark, and it was amplified by Jupiter, which makes it the highest dark control possible. I was just like, she has no idea what she's saying. And I'm just sitting there like, cause I don't want to be right, but I'm like, but for me, did you ever see Lost? The episodes Lost, or
a little bit of it. I didn't really watch the whole thing. No.
Yeah, well, I just finished. I think there's like a million series thing episode, but at the end, they're all in these different parallel whatever, and they see someone that they've been in all these deals. And I'm sorry if I'm spoiling it if you guys are out there.
Spoiler alert.
But there's a part where like something happens and they touch, or they grab a cup or something, and they like connect, and all of a sudden they can see where they were in different times together, and it just like parallel places, or I don't know if it's reincarnation, I don't know what it is, but I was like, that is exactly how it felt for me with either a different people or a thing. It would just like something would happen, or I would smell something or whatever, and I was like, all this stuff would just come down. And I had a thing like you too, where I was literally, I don't know how long your thing was. Mine would be in stages where there was one period of about 3 or 4 days where I wasn't sure if I was going to be here any longer. Like it was rough, like the roughest. So, because some of it's just like you said, all these different bits of like, what's real? It's like all these lies and everything that's been, it's just like, what's real? Is anything real? So what do you do when people are coming to you and they're talking to you? Like, how do you suggest people like get through, being where they are now with everything that's happened? I mean, what?
Like I said, well, there's no silver bullet. So what I found in my own case, in the very beginning, like I said, when I got these memories back, it was terrifying. It was terrifying for many reasons. Mostly because I really didn't have anyone to talk to. I started really having bad emotional, anxiety from it. And I'm thinking I need to get some counseling. I need to talk to somebody. And I knew that if I went to your standard over-the-counter professional counselor, I was going to be immediately medicated. And I was going to get nowhere. I was going to get no answers to what I remembered. And so I dealt with other researchers instead. But what I found was that when I unraveled what I remembered when, and I've worked with a lot of people. I've worked with a few thousand people since then. And 99% of the time, I find that if you take what you remember and try to figure out a time around it, so when it may have happened, how old you were when you got this. So I had let's just say, for instance, somebody said, I had a dream that I was taken, and it's a reoccurring dream that happens all the time. But there's one thing about it that's super real. And I go, well, when did you first have the dream? And they go, this time. And I said, well, what happened around that time? If I find that when you put it in, like, and this is in the memory course that I offer on my website, is that I find that if you put it into a timeline and then begin to analyze other things that you think may or may not have had any correlation with it, and then stretch it out and look at the time, like, okay, now when did you remember it? Where are we now? When were you born? When did you move? And you start looking at events in people's lives that it really starts to point an arrow at things that happen. Like, a lot of people just have a little bit of things, but then I go, well, what happened? When was that? And I go, well, what happened 20 years later? And they go, wait a minute. And I go, and there was a change. There was something new 20 years later. I said, right. So you were 15. How old are you? You're 50. So 15, what happened when you were 35? And they go, oh, that's when I got married. And, like, there's always increments there. So recently I've spoken with Dr. Andrew Bashago. I was fortunate and had a phone call with him. And he said he was famous from being in the Project Pegasus, was a CIA, or like a U.S. government time travel program. And what he said was, within the program, that the Earth has 20-year pulses.
Wow.
In 20-year increments. That when you look at tree rings, that every 20 years there's a different ring. A lot of tree rings, it's a 20-year thing. And he said that the Pegasus, the early versions of it, of the program, could only go back in 20 years. So they could only go back 20 years or 40 years or 60 years. They could go back in 20-year increments because the radiation, there's a signature of these pulses on the Earth that allow for time travel to happen. Wow. So what I've also found is that people's lifetimes will have events on 20-year increments as well. When you talk about weirdness, like, there was a flying saucer that flew over me, and I don't know what happened. And I go, when was that? And they go, okay, 1980. And I go, did anything happen in 2000? They go, wait a minute. When in 2000 I was at the beach and there was another. You get what I'm saying? Like, these are things that we need to start thinking outside of the linear component of our life, because you're talking about people that have technology that can step outside of time space. There are literally, I remember we were doing business with bases that were inside temporal bubbles around Jupiter, in the vicinity of Jupiter, not close to it, but in the vicinity of Jupiter, that there were actual rips in time space, or bubbles. And you could go in the bubble, the ship could fly in, and it had to fly out exact same angle and speed, otherwise it would come out at a different time.
Wow.
And inside of it was just black space. There were no stars, no nothing. And they would put a base in there because they were immune to changes in time space. So if somebody went back and changed time, changed the timeline, then they would be immune to that because they were outside of time space, and they could go back and fix it and affect it. And these bubbles are around that area, basically, where Jupiter is a very unique area of space, which makes our region of space very valuable because it has access to these things like that. So that's what I recommend to people. Break it down, break any kind of weirdness down into a timeline, take note of it, for the very simple reason that you can add to it later. Because if you're starting to remember things, if you had contact and you're remembering things now, more things will come. And the things that you're remembering now will be fuzzy a year from now, and new things will be clear. And you need some sort of timeline. You need some sort of reference point to add to and to check, and write everything down. Even if it's not important, get it in there. Dreams, just any kind of weirdness, because a lot of people have, it's not just one thing. They don't just have most people don't just have one flash of thing. There's many things especially when you get on the level of being curious.
So with, like Kathy O'Brien, she actually knows people who are still living that were issues when she was a kid. And I know that you were a part of a lot of stuff being sold off while you're still in the 20-year program, but on Earth, having to do all this stuff with whoever owned you, I guess.
Right. So, okay. So,
yeah, go into that. And then, like, have you ran into anybody that you remember, like, that's here now, or has that ever happened?
yes, I've met a few people that I met during that time that I've been contacted by a few people. Some of them don't even know it. Some of them don't. I've been contacted by people that saw my interview and contacted me, and I remembered them, but they don't remember me because they don't have their memories that
Okay.
and it's happened, and I've learned that it's a very inappropriate thing to tell somebody that they were involved. So it's something that you have to undo for yourself, because your higher self or whatever needs to give permission to that. It's not something you could force on somebody. In other words, if I walking down the street and I see somebody that I knew while I was working on series, and I go, "Hello, do you remember me?" and they go, "No," it's very inappropriate for me to tell them that they've been involved in something so kind of far out. It's just I've done it, and it's damaging. The person that I did it to was very damaged from it. It was very traumatic. The Kathy O'Brien thing was, in the beginning in Seattle. So people that have access to these programs, you tend to, I think most people, we've been programmed to think that people that are wealthy or people that are in power are somehow also noble and moral. You know what I mean? You just think like, well, you wouldn't be that wealthy if you weren't very smart, and that's not necessarily true. And people that are in charge of these programs the one that had me in the beginning was a practicing Satanist,
Mm.
and a kabbalistic Satanist, and so he was committing ritual human sacrifice as well as pedophilia. And so we were at some point when I was no longer good at being a remote viewer. I did a couple years, about a year and a half of service as a sex slave, and there in Seattle. And so Kathy O'Brien, I believe, went through the same thing, but she was like a higher level and 100% dedicated to the sex service. So this is a very real thing. They are very organized. It's been around for a very long time, longer than the United States. There's this cult, and it's something that's very real. It goes on to this day. So, like you said, everything is not what we've been told it was. Sexuality isn't either. We've been told to what? Not have sex. Get married, don't have sex, don't do it. But we can. You know what I mean? The elites, we find out more and more. The Epstein, you know what I mean? All the elites, Prince Andrew, they're having quite a bit of they're having quite a bit of sex. They're having quite a bit. And they're using slaves. They have slaves. And we don't it's uncomfortable to entertain, but it's the truth. And they also use it because it's so easy. Remember I forget how long ago it was a decade ago, the guy that was in charge of the IMF, the International Monetary Fund,
Mhm.
all of a sudden he was involved in a sex scandal, lost his job, lost everything. Just he had some uh it was a maid or some hotel maid said he sexually abused her, and then that was that. He was out of there. It's a very powerful, undefendable thing. So if a girl comes up and says that a guy sexually assaulted her, basically he's going to get in trouble. And this is a very powerful tool that the elite use to control each other in government. And Epstein is our public proof of it. You don't take my word for it. Go research it. And there's a lot of it. There's a lot of evidence to support what I say. And these are things also that I remembered in 2015, before the Pizzagate, before the Hillary emails, before Comet Planet Ping Pong or whatever, before all this stuff came to the surface and then was pushed under the surface as a conspiracy theory, before Epstein, before all this, I came forward and made a connection between, the pedophilia and the Satanism and the space program and the secret space program, the secret military. I made that connection with because it's just what I remembered. And then I was very saddened when it came true, when it became public. I was very saddened to see that everything I remember existed. and does exist. So, this is something, like I said, we've been led astray. We've been kept, under wraps and in the dark. And these are things that are going to have to come to light. People are going to have to realize that, right or wrong has to be sorted out later. We need to worry about why and how. And that's just what I remember. So Kathy O'Brien was, I feel, I never read her entire book or the entire testimony. Like, I think I have the PDF somewhere, but I went through it and I read enough to know that she's legitimate, and that's exactly how they operate. That's exactly how the cabal operates. And sadly, that's like one of the better pieces of evidence that supports my account.
Well, I haven't read her book. I just saw 1,000 Pieces, which if you guys haven't seen that, go watch 1,000 Pieces, Roger Richards' documentary that exposes a lot of this stuff and all the ABC 3-letter organizations and what's really going on there, and how so many people are having to actually leave these organizations to support real government versus the government that we are living in. And but yeah, she's been out there for years, speaking the truth and whatever. Have you met up with, like, you said that you've recognized people and people have recognized you? When is that from the Seattle stuff? Is that from the Mars stuff? Is that from the Jupiter stuff? Is that from all of it? Like, I mean, and when that happens, like, I'm just curious, like, walk me through that.
What it's like?
Yeah, you can't, because you don't say anything anymore, because you said something before that, and then it damaged, you said, which I understand. That could be like, what?
I get it. A lot of people have gotten a hold of me and said, "Do you remember me?" And I said, "No, I don't." And I really do have a hard time with faces. They when they blank slate you and they put you back, they put you through several stations of, like, it looked like an arcade. Like imagine like a modern day arcade with games, that the ones that you sit in the booth, you sit down and you can close the curtain, you're inside a little arcade game. It looked like that, and that was industrial grade hypnosis and some sort of mind control. That was the early stages of the blank slating process. It was a very long process. It wasn't just you put you in a room and give you a shot or an eye drop and then you forget. It was a few days of hypnosis, industrial grade hypnosis in these machines. And one of the processes was to make you forget faces and names of streets. Like, I don't remember street names. The ship names are hard, but you still remember things about people. People can be very unique, and I'm sure everybody here can agree that there are people in your life that you would recognize in the dark. If you were blind and silent and deaf and mute, you would still recognize them by behavior and just by the feel. And you know what I mean? People behave a certain way. And if you had amnesia, you would still go, man, you're so familiar.
Yeah.
And so there were things like that. There were people that contacted me. I don't want to give names or even really when. But there have been a few, and it's like, you know them because when you get to the point where you know somebody on a very personal level. And strangely, I've heard from other people that have gone through the experience of 20 and backs, or 20-year tours, as I could like to call it, a 20-year tour, that there's a saying, not a saying, but there's a consequence of people that fall in love up there tend to find each other down here.
Really?
Right. And it's like super, they say that you hear it time and time again, that it's just weird long shot where we just bumped into each other at the mall. I knew it was her. I remembered her. And you know what I mean? Like, during the same time, that it's like a very, it's one of those things that is very unlikely, but still happens more often than it should. It's like a phenomenon. That's what the word I was looking for. It's a phenomenon during the 20 and back thing. The people that serve together and become lovers tend to run into each other down on Earth. Even if they live on the other side of the planet, they still will somehow find each other. And it's just there's some kind of soul thing that happens,
Flames, even in other galaxies. Pretty cool.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe not that powerful, but just, you know what I mean? Like you make a connection. Like I said, like the elite are having a lot of sex, and everything you hear from everything from the elite is don't have sex,
Mhm.
abstain, just say no. You know what I mean? Like they don't want us to, but they want to. So there's more to it than just procreation or being, you know what I mean? There's a lot more to it than what we've been told. So
So you did how many years? You were in Seattle for a bit, and you were in California for a bit. Where else?
Peru,
On Peru, okay. And what
I
were
was
you?
I was taken to a base. I was given by ETs. I was given some kind of medical procedures, a major medical procedure. They knocked me out, and I woke up with with amnesia. I had no memory of my mom or dad or my brothers and sisters. And in Inyo Kern Air Base in that area in Southern California, I went through a trauma-based mind control program and basically like a theta programming they called it, and remote viewing. And then I was shipped from there to Seattle for a couple of weeks, for like a week, and witnessed a bunch of the satanic stuff that was at that house. Then from there, I was shipped to Peru, Porto Tawantinsuyo, Peru, and I was there for almost 2 years, where I was a intuitive on flights. They were drug running. They were flights of cocaine, allegedly. I'll say that so that they were flying from Porto Tawant. It was coming in. It was being manufactured in the forests and coming upriver, a little bit at a time. And at the end of the month, when they had a plane load, they would fly it to Santa Marta, Colombia. And I was being drugged halfway through the plane ride over the state of Acre. They would put me under. I'd get an IV and I'd be drugged. And I was a warning system, like an early warning system. If there were going to be police or bad weather, or they got lost. That's what I did. I was a psychic for them, a brujo, and they would go there, they'd make the drop, and then they'd fly back. And that's what I did. It was monthly stuff, and I lived in a little hut. I had a black and white TV. I watched Spanish television, and like. And eventually, when I got, I guess, right around closer to puberty, there was a few other things that happened. Like they started giving me sugar. I wasn't supposed to eat sugar, and I lost the ability. I started getting really sick when I did it. So they shipped me back to Seattle, and that was right around 13 till 16 ish. And that's when I went through. I was there, like it was like living in a foster home with 5 or 6 other boys. They would come and go, and they were having parties during the summer and fundraisers, and we were sex slaves for that. That's what we did. And after that, when I was no longer conducive for that, there's another. They were giving us pills, and then they changed the formula, and I became allergic and sick from the pills. They sold me off to the military. That was the exact term that they said. You're going to be sold to the military. She dropped me off behind a store with a couple guys in a van. They gave me a shot. I lost consciousness, and I woke up on a ship on my way to the moon, to the backside of the moon, where I was reprogrammed and another bout of mind control and used in a support soldier role. And then from there, I went to Mars, and we were in a program, a support soldier role, a support. So we were support soldiers. So they had a few soldiers that were really well armed and really well equipped.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so for some of the people, just in general who are watching, and this is just like, whoa.
Right.
Explain super soldier, explain support soldier, just so everyone can be on the same page.
The landscape on Mars. So someone told me that there's about 10.5 million people living on Mars as we speak.
Yep.
The landscape there is not, we do not have, at the time that I was there especially, we did not have control of Mars. We have controls of areas of Mars, but we didn't have airspace rights. They had to watch where they flew. There are advanced ETs and there are indigenous ETs that live there that are very dangerous, and they had skirmishes over territory often. There is an insectoid race, an intelligent race of giant insects that is indigenous to Mars, and I guess there's a reptilian race, which I never saw or had contact with. They were trying to match the numbers of the insects. So they had a few soldiers, but they couldn't keep putting soldiers on. They're very expensive and hard to get. The soldiers that are trained their whole life in my labs that put there. So they took guys like me that was basically a slave that was just randomly taken. I was not groomed for what I did. Programmed me to be able to commit suicide in combat, and put us there as a support group for those soldiers. And we did combat missions. And what they found was that the insects adapted much quicker than they were supposed to. So they canceled it. When they canceled it, they moved me to a city, like an underground city, and then retrained. I was given aptitude tests, and then retrained as for ship maintenance. That's what I did, was ship maintenance, and they sold me from the Mars Colony Corporation to the Ceres Colony Corporation, and I was transported to the planetoid Ceres, CERES, which is in between the orbit of Mars and the asteroid belt, and that was inhabited by Germans, a breakaway German group that broke away in probably the 30s or 40s, and found an existing infrastructure inside the Ceres asteroid, dwarf planet, excuse me. They found an existing base there, and they started to convert it to human whatever quarters. They started to move in, and they built cities. And there were about 200,000 people, 225, 230,000 people living there at the time. And they were building towns underground throughout the inside. Whenever they found a large pocket of water, they would mine, and they find water and empty it out, and then go in there and build cities. And then I worked there for about 12 years, 10 or 12 years. I was a ship maintenance for about 8, and then that ship was decommissioned, and I was put on a new ship and retrained, and I was a cargo engineer on interstellar trade flights for the Ceres Colony Corporation with other AET races throughout the cosmos. And we did that. That was my job, and I was a cargo engineer, basically measured and weighed the cargo and entered data into the computer.
So so there are tons of people there, and then there's the ET races, and are they interacting with one another? Like,
absolutely, yes, absolutely.
Everyone, and so there's good guys, bad guys, because I know a lot of people think, ETs, and we've been programmed to think like, oh my God, scary, they're going to hurt us, they're going to blow us up.
We've been programmed to think that they're either a good guy or a bad guy, and that's not the case. I'm a good guy and I'm a bad guy, depending on when you run into me and why. Do you know what I'm saying? You are a great person, and you're a bad person too. You know why? Because you're a person. That's you're right.
Yep.
And so every time we see a show or read a book, a story, there's somebody in that show or that story that's always good, and there's another person that's always bad, because it makes for a good read, a quick read. It doesn't make for reality. And the reality is, of the ET races, they're just like us. They're good and bad. There's not a single good guy. There's not a single bad guy. There are cultures that do things that we might find disgusting, like the Germans had slavery still. They stole from people. They were basically a military ran organization, so kind of misogynistic as well. They had arranged marriages, like, I forget the word for it, but basically they were carrying on breeding. They're trying to breed their population. And so there's a lot of things that we don't agree with that we find civilized, but that doesn't mean that it shouldn't exist. And that's just the way that they went. So other races, other cultures, even around the world, there are people in Papua New Guinea that eat people still. There's still cannibalism. There's still tribalism. So space was the same way. Space was the exact same way. And our mandate on our ship was 100% to trade goods for technology. The idea was to trade for greater technology, to get improvements in technology. That was the entire mission, the mission statement. And if they could trade a chunk of steel for something for a gizmo that was more advanced than what they had, then that was ideal. That was the ideal trade. So that was what we did. And they were always entertaining guests, ETs, to come there. They'd roll out the red carpet. They would entertain them, and they wanted to court them into a trade deal to learn their technologies or whatever it was. I mean, there's always a lot that you could trade. And what I remember is that most of the ET races throughout the cosmos, they don't deal in money, they deal in knowledge, and they trade knowledge as a currency.
So and DNA is a big commodity.
Commodity. Yeah.
Thank you for that word, commodity. And then also these people because there's humans there. Are they all slaves? Are they all just been picked up? Do they know that they're slaves? Are they all?
There were about 40,000 slaves on the Ceres colony. The rest of the people were indigenous there, and they had different levels of freedom amongst themselves because the government ran everything. The military was basically, the people that were military officers basically had run of the place and a semblance of freedom, even though they were in a military. The citizenship, I really, I don't know what their level of quality of life was, but they had a pretty iron hand when the authorities showed up. So, but it was basically a military ran society, and about 40,000 people that I'm aware of, 40, 50,000 people were slaves there, and I was one of them. We were kept in a barracks, and we were basically labor. We did labor.
And I know the answer to this, but both female and male. I mean, there's all different genders there, and even the soldiers are both. What about procreation? Are there kids? I mean,
there were children. Yeah, I saw children there. I get asked a lot. I got asked a lot today, actually. What animals were they? Did they have pets?
I was just thinking, dogs or cats?
I didn't see any. I did not see any pets there. I don't have any recollection of pets. That doesn't mean they didn't have them, but I just didn't come in contact with them. The other thing was we had to wear a collar. I had basically like a shock collar, like a dogs have, and that was part of the mind control. Was you were trained, you were programmed that if you were shocked, that you would stop everything that you were doing, go into like a catatonic state and await command, and it would last for 15 or 20 minutes. After a shock. So that was part of the original programming in Inyokern that they gave me. So I had to wear a collar, and to go out into public was pretty humiliating experience. People would tell you, get out of the way. I would get ordered around. There was nothing I could do about it. And so it was very humiliating. And I kind of stayed away from the general public as much as I could. I rode trains, and I spent time where I was welcome, which unbelievably enough was a place in the red light district. They had a red light district. And there was a place there that I could go and just kind of sit and be left alone and not be in the barracks. Because when you were in the barracks, when I was off duty and in the barracks, at any given moment, I could be drafted and have to do work. Whenever they had something to do, they just you, come on. And you'd be put to work, and it could be hard work, it could not. So I didn't want to stay there, and I didn't want to be in public. So it was an ideal arrangement for me to just go to this place that was a club, and I was allowed to stay there in one of the tables until it filled up, and then I had to leave because the table was out of the sight of the owner, and there had been a girl that was assaulted in that table. So when I was there, he said, you can stay, it's a long story, we don't have a lot of time, but basically the owner had agreed with me. He said, you can stay there until it fills up, so that way nobody sits in that table, and it's safer for the girls. So that was kind of where I spent my free time in the last couple years that I was up there.
Well, and then when you came back, because people are asking about your parents, and I mean, I have my own version, but when you came back, you were 10 years old, and were you remembering, because they regress, the age regress, and they wipe you, and you're back like just a little bit before your time that they took you away. But did you have memories right away? Did you know that you were even back? I mean, what was your integration like?
Okay, so they take you and you're gone for about 30 minutes. So from the time I was taken out of bed, I went and lived 20 years and was put back, and we can go into that. That's a whole nother show. And I was put back, and about 30 minutes later, I was put right back in bed. When I woke up the next morning, I had the sensation of not being there for 20 years, even though I had no memories of those 20 years. Those memories were gone. I woke up the next morning and I went, I'm in my room. And I was like somewhere new to me, but I remembered I had my toys on the ground, on the floor, and I was still I went, I'm home. I'm in my room. And I was thrilled. And I went downstairs and I told my mom and my sister and my dad that I hadn't seen them in years. I feel like I haven't seen you in years. And my sister said, shut up, dummy. We just had dinner last night. Like my older sister was like, shut up, you dummy. When I went to school that day, so I had to get up in the morning. It was a Friday, I think, Thursday or Friday. But I went to school, and later in the day, I had to use the bathroom. I raised my hand and I said, can I go? And this wasn't a big school, a giant school. I raised my hand. I said, can I, fourth grade? And I said, I need to go use the bathroom. And she said, okay. And I said, where is it?
Wow.
Because I didn't remember where it was. And the whole class laughed at me. And she said, what? You just used the bathroom yesterday. You know exactly where. I said, no, seriously, I don't remember where it is. She said, you're too mean to tell me you don't remember where the bathroom is. And another girl was like, it's right down the hall there. I went, she called my mom, My teacher had called my mom that day, later that day, and said that I had amnesia, like something was wrong. And everybody talked about it in school for a little while. Um, but that was the experience. And then I was a different person. I was changed. I wasn't the same person I was the day before. And there were all kinds of weird side effects of that. I was 10 years old. I, I want to bite my tongue. I don't want to say a whole TMI, but there was a lot of things that were different about me. And I was really never the same
Yeah.
ever after.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, how would anybody be the same after that?
Right.
What's interesting is with going back to the scalar wave, they can actually they gave me a number of this 20-year period, but they didn't understand how. I mean, we'll have to talk off camera, but I mean, it's so for people who don't believe there's aliens at all, let alone aliens here on Earth, explain, because from someone who has firsthand information on that, I would
So
love.
look, right. Okay. So lately I've been going round and round with some flat Earth people, and they're really emotionally invested in it. Once people get into the flat Earth, they're really emotionally invested. And they don't want to look at the actual science around it. There's a lot of data that shows easily and clearly that the world is round, that we live on a ball. Astronomy is a great thing. I tell them, and I don't want to sound like I'm condescending or anything, but I say, like, get into astronomy. It's an awesome hobby. It's fun. They have parties, star parties. Get a little telescope, and then get to learn. You what? I'm sorry, but
Sorry, that's funny.
you're reading something.
So, but yes, ETs, for people who do not believe that there are ETs on the planet working with our government in the ground, like my lab stuff, like
Well, just the existence of ETs is basically an easy logical assumption. So back in the day when they said there was no life, in the 70s, when you went to school and you asked the teacher, is there life elsewhere? They said, we don't even know if any of the stars have planets around them. That was the argument. They said, we don't know if there's life around out there because we don't even know if any other planets exist. So now they have exoplanets galore, plenty, and they're everywhere. So now the numbers suggest that life is not only possible but probable. And really, the reality between me and you, that the reality is that 7 out of 10 stars has an Earth-like planet inhabited, and all of the stars have a base or some sort of civilization that's moved into the star system and using it for its resources. Life is very old in the cosmos. It's very common. And people want to think that, what is the Pleiadians are in charge of everything, or the Andromeda. That's not the case. We could leave and go to other galaxies and come back in the same day. So the entire universe, once you reach a level of technology, is accessible, and it's an almost infinite amount of civilizations. So you're never going to meet everybody. You're never going to go there. It's just not. You got to live a long time before you can do that. It's a very populated, very infinite, big neighborhood forest. It's a forest that we live in. So there are many different life forms throughout. As far as proving that they're here on Earth, I mean, there's a lot of history about it. There's a lot of can't give you a smoking gun, right? Because they are much better at hiding it than we are at finding it. But just recently, I think just on Fox News, they came out and said the Pentagon and other people have confirmed that there are craft from other worlds and they had materials. I saw like it was, I forget his name, but there was a Fox News show that had material that was not of this earth. They had a piece of material that was from a craft, and they said they had it analyzed and it's not of this earth. So the mainstream news is admitting it now. But we've been our whole life we've been told that it's a joke. So people just don't want it. Now that they're being presented with information, you have to backtrack, and some people will find it embarrassing and don't want to admit. But the truth is that we're not alone. We're probably not even from here.
right.
We're not even from here in the beginning. How did we go from an ape, and then 200,000 years ago? Only 200,000 years is the human record. The world there's a lot more that happened since then. So we really don't have our own history at all. There's a lot that's going on. So there's a great deal of evidence. If there was 1 millionth the evidence that I was a criminal, I'd be sitting in jail tonight. Do you know what I'm saying? Like if there was 1 millionth of the evidence of extraterrestrial life on the earth, 1 million, if you break all the evidence we have down and take 1 millionth of it and then use that much against me that I'm a criminal, I'd be sitting in jail right now because that's how much evidence there is. There's just so many eyewitness reports. There's videos. There's so many things that just go on. And
Yeah,
when
people
you
are
look
like
at
fake or it's not real, or it's, especially now that we have so much great technology, oh, that's the movies, or it's CGI, or
I
but
love
you
it when people
yeah,
always say like, when I say something, they go, "Oh, there's bugs on Mars." So you saw Starship Troopers, and then I make a sketch of the reptiles that took me out, and they go, "Oh, you saw Communion." People use that as a debunking thing that they have some of it in some movie. Like they've given us all the truth a little bit sprinkled out over 1,000 movies instead of just one movie with all the truth. So that's why it's a debunking thing. Say, well, that's you didn't experience that. It was in a movie.
yep, like Jupiter Rising, the reptilian in there is like, when I saw that, I was like, oh my God. Yeah. I mean, that triggered a bunch of stuff. But I mean, and just like Space Force, with Trump coming out with Space Force, which is now the public Space Force,
We're going to
will,
get a disclosure very soon.
yeah, yeah,
In,
it
in the
seems,
next 4 years or so, they're going to give us we're going to see pictures. You know what I
yeah,
mean, of life beyond the earth. Where it's going to be soon, and that's really what's going on. Is they're volleying for who's going to be in charge? Is it going to be the United States that makes contact, or is it going to be China? And that's really what we're seeing. And that's what
that's what's happening now,
there's a
because
war going on behind the scenes. That's exactly why.
and it's who has the most space. It's really who can take care of the space, is like who's going to run the planet, and that's where we're all like. That's why there's this fraud with all the elections and everything else, because there is going to be a time of disclosure. And then going back to what they made fun, what you're saying, they make fun of it in the movies to debunk it. When the same week that Trump came out with the Space Force, the flag, announcing it, which isn't like really a big deal because Ronald Reagan talked about it. And we know that they were even trading humans for technology and for DNA and experiments like back in the day, 40s. But Netflix comes out with Michael Correll's, Space
Yeah, the
Force,
joke of it.
to make fun of it, to
Yeah,
just go,
a
oh yeah,
comedy.
yeah. And then they just went off, and first I was like kind of excited because I love The Office, and I thought Michael Correll, and I watched like 20 minutes or so. I was like, oh my God, I can't. Like, it was like, this is so disappointing because they're just trying to make fun of him and everything about actual Space Force or any kind of life off planet, but let alone on planet. I mean, you guys can look up like Valiant Thor, and I mean, there's technology. How do you think we're getting all this technology? A lot of it's reverse engineered, even the iPhones, replicators, med beds, spaceships. There's so many things that aren't declassed, that are declassed. Like,
Well, once they give us the anti-grav technology, then it's basically the genie's out of the bottle. We'll have the ability to leave the earth, and then we're going to become, some people, let's face it, aren't ready to be in space. There's a huge section of society that very much and very in a petty way victimizes others. And I wouldn't wish them on any extraterrestrials. They really don't deserve to go anywhere. So we have a great deal of society that doesn't value life, doesn't value respect. You know what I mean? And so that's going to have to be curbed when we do. Once the anti-grav happens, and that's really what they're holding. Once that happens, once we have the ability to go in our garage and build an anti-grav engine, we'll be able to leave Earth. We'll be free, and we're going to be somebody else's problem. And so they don't. They're all on the same page that they don't want our problems until we can solve some of them. And we're going to see that. We're going to see in the next 4 years, regardless of who's in power, we are going to see some very, very quick advances, not only in technology and energy use, but in societal. We're going to see some big society changes right now, like quick, because they're trying to get us out. Because we're to the point now where we can discover them. Before it was only a university that could afford a telescope that could see that. Now people can have the technology in their garage to build something that can see them. So they have to kind of speed it up. And I think they've changed their plans a few times on what would happen at this point, but they have to disclose. And society has been so manipulated to away from a noble goal, from a noble life, that they're going to have to really kind of straighten it out here in a minute. And the kids show promise. I'm both concerned and proud of the kids nowadays. I gotta say that most of the kids coming up, like, there's really a big emphasis on inclusion. On being what's the word, accepting of people. Whereas when I was a kid, it wasn't. It was beat them up kind of thing. So I think that's a new trend. I think it's a good thing. I would just like to see them a little bit more empowered so that they'd work for themselves. So we'll see how it goes. But there's going to be some big changes in the next 4 years or so that are going to lead to inclusion into a galactic civilization.
Well, we're definitely going to have you for a part 2 for sure, because I have like literally 2 pages of questions.
Look, and I want to say that I've been reading the chat here, and there's a lot of great questions that I'd love to get to, but I don't want, they'll take a lot of time. There's a lot of awesome questions over there, so I love the Q&As.
If you are okay with this, we can schedule a part 2, and it'll just be like questions.
I would love that. I would love that.
Take some of these that are here, some of the ones that have come up through here, but I do have one before we went. I'm sorry we went over time for what I said that we were going to do, but I could keep going for a long time. Can you do one more question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So what do you say? Because like for me, having the things that I'm remembering and what have you, you've said this many times, and you were like, because it's a lot. I mean, it's a lot for me, let alone talking to others. And like my husband, who I'm married to now, we were together years ago. We had a breakup. We got back together. But I've known him since I'm 17. And so he, to me, knows me more than most anybody on the planet, besides my own family. And, when this was coming up, I mean, a lot of the memories were all the whole while, but they didn't fit anything that made sense at all, because why would you talk about anything off planet or, whatever. I mean, it seemed like my imagination to make up some kind of weird thing, but then the memories would be the exact over and over with great detail, very much the same over and over. And I started to realize, like, I cannot be making this up. Like, this can't be something that's just happening to show up in my head, So I started talking about some of it. And then two, there are things that are still happening. Like, these aren't just things that happened, back then, but there's things that are still happening. And so having to compartmentalize it through the filter of what I have in this program, for a while, it was through God and ministry and angels. And I love God. And that's a great question too, is like, what about God? But that's a big question though. So, and missing time and, hours being gone and then put back and stuff like that. So I would talk about those things, but it was through the filter of what I can only know is, oh, well, I guess this is God doing stuff, and not that God isn't, I do believe in God. I just don't. Anyway, that's a whole nother thing. But so whenever I was telling my husband, and then I would get like confirmation or someone said something else, I'm like, see, like, I'm not the only one. This person too. He would be like, baby, it's a lot. And, even telling my mom, some of the things, and she would know some stuff, and she confirmed some things. And I was like, okay, good. I don't feel so crazy. But also there's that, like, I remember at one point my husband saying, how come you never talked about this? And it's like, it's hard to say because it sounds so stupid, because it doesn't fit anything. You know what I mean? Like, underground.
When you're piecing it together, when you're piecing it together, you don't have a clear picture. So you don't speak about things that you haven't solved. You know what I mean? Like unless somebody's solving it with it, when you're putting it together in your head, you're unsure still. So it's hard to speak about things that you're unsure of because you can be talked out of it, right?
Yeah.
And what you said earlier, the way you described it, it was a reoccurring thing with great detail. It was exactly how I experienced it before, like when I was in my teens and 20s, while it was still going on. That's exactly how I experienced it. And I thought, like in a dream, you don't remember how you got there. Like imagine you dream that you're in a store. In the dream, if you stop and you become lucid, you don't remember driving to the store. You can't instantly dream that you got up that morning, took a shower, got in the car, and drove to the store, walked in the door. You don't have that. And a dream doesn't work like that. You also can't go home from the dream because it's a dream, because it represents something else. But a memory, when these came through, I had a memory of waking up, taking a shower, getting dressed, riding a train, getting on the ship and going. And I would have these memories and I would go, when could I have possibly done that? I also have memories of every day of my normal life. I'm 17 years old. When could I have learned that? And plus I had a job and a trade. I knew what I was doing. Like I knew how to operate some computer, and computers didn't even exist back when I was remembering this. You know what I mean? Like touch screen computers didn't exist when I had remembered learning programs on a touchscreen computer. And so that it was the same experience, like you said. And I just said, well, that's got to be bullshit, and just kind of brushed it off. And it wasn't until later when I realized, and when I learned about from seeing some other things, that they take people and they can go off in a quantum time dilation for 20 years and they can put you back right where they found you. And I went, oh my God, because I thought the original abduction that I always remembered was just one night. That, you know what I mean? That there wasn't time. I thought that there wasn't time for all this stuff to happen to me. So your logical mind, your logical brain kind of just crosses that out. That can't be. So just move on. And when I finally realized that, boy, they had all the time in the world. I had 20 years. Oh my God, that happened. And then I went, oh my God, that happened. And once you can accept it, once one of those memories gets accepted as real, the rest kind of flooded in, and it was very difficult. It's a very difficult thing. Most people, 99% of people that I speak to have bad things that they remember, the emotional things, you know what I mean? Like people, they're not using us. They're not using us. They're not taking people and using them in programs so that they can go up and be on vacation. They're using you to do very difficult, very horrible things,
Yeah.
for jobs that are undesirable. And that's why they can, and they say, well, you're not going to remember it anyway. So
Yes.
that's how justifies the humanity of it. And, well, they won't remember it. So if I take somebody and abuse them and use them to get what I want, it's okay. They won't remember it. I'll put them back in their life right at the same night they left. They'll get up the next morning, go on about their life with no harm, no foul. That's how the management sees this program. That's how they see it. So I'm happy that I remember it and I can talk about it because I disprove that bullshit that they gave us. That you're not going to remember it anyway. So I'm living proof that it's wrong.
And they say that you're not going to remember this. You're not going to remember this. It's like a program to not remember. And there was like physical things that would happen. You're going to die if you remember. Different things.
Well, they call them parting gifts.
What is it?
They call them parting gifts. They give you parting gifts. Here's your parting gift, and that makes you a block. When you start remembering, you start writing it down. You'll become sleepy or you're hungry or whatever. You'll be distracted. They put subconscious blocks in there so that you can't remember, and those can be defeated. It's like working out a weak muscle. So when you start writing it down, you do a little bit today, and wait a couple of days, do a little bit, and then you get tired. And just do it over time, and after a while, it gets strong. You get stronger, and you don't have that effect anymore. It goes away. It's just hypnosis is how they did it.
I hadn't heard of it referred to that way, but I've also had where people have physical symptoms besides sleep, where they just feel sick or they, different things. But so there's so many things, but last thing, what, with all the stuff going on in the election and whatever, where do you think is going to happen? Do you have
We're at war right now. The coronavirus is $1 trillion bioweapon that's kicking ass. It's doing its job. We are at war and we're getting beat up. right now. So with the election and where that's at is proof that there's and people go, well, who was it? What do you mean? You know what I mean? People think it's Democrats versus Republicans. It's not the case. It's a international cabal of corporations that have their own space fleet, that are dealing with their own ETs, that have treaties in space against another space fleet by the United States and by Canada and a few other countries. And it's an international cabal, and they're basically operate in every country around the world. It's an ancient religion, a cult that worships some ET god and is okay with Satanism. And they've been in charge for a long time, and other people have gotten the same level of technology as them and are fighting back within our government. And they're getting beat up. It's a war. It's been going on for 8 years, and we're coming to a head right now. We're going to, in the next few days, we're going to see another large battle of it. We're going to see something happen. I mean, everything that's happening is somehow tied in. I mean, we had remember the missile that was the inbound missile going to Hawaii. Then that same week, there was meteors over southern Michigan. There were things that looked like meteors. It was like something breaking up. We've been seeing stuff break up in the atmosphere quite often. And it could be meteorites, but B, it could be orbital craft fighting, and which really is. It all started in 2012 or 2013 when we had all the earthquakes worldwide. All of a sudden, earthquakes spawned because they were pouring in bombs and blowing up underground facilities. Mm-hmm. They had certain nets that made people remember their time, and those technologies were disabled. And then all of a sudden we had a generation of people that came, myself, whistleblowers that came forward remembering this stuff. They all, most of the time you go, why didn't they kill you? Because they were busy fighting. They were at war. And we have been at war. There's been a lot going on. And the coronavirus is $1 trillion bioweapon.
So you're saying because the underground places were blown up, that it broke a net that connected to the memory?
A layer of security, absolutely.
Wow. Because so many people that I talked to, that seems to be a pivotal time, 2012, 13, and then again, 16, 17 seems to be a huge
It was right after all those earthquakes happened. And earthquakes happen in places in the world that are not volcanic. Michigan had them, there's a fault line. But they all happened at once, and in a short period of time. So that was the first volleys of some warfare. There's a war going on up there. I've talked to a lot of people that have great memory of their service, and their timelines would suggest that they're still up there fighting. So they can remember things from our future, which is their past, when you think about it. And so there's a war going on between the colonies in the solar system, and it's a vie for who's going to be in charge after when the population of Earth joins them. And so whoever's in charge of all that is going to be very powerful when they have 7 billion people that under their control, or 4 billion, or whatever's left, or who's going to be there. So we're in the middle of some very historic times for a disclosure. And what we're seeing with the coronavirus is it's a weapon, and it's kicking ass, because look what it's done. I mean, when you war with a country, when a country wars, the first thing you do is cripple their capacity to make war, their economy and their production. I can't even get a freezer. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can't get ammo. We've already been crippled. We've been crippled as if they dropped bombs on us, but they didn't even drop a bomb. They just let out a bug, and that's it. And it's worked. And the media has helped them. Our media is our primary enemy at this point. I think, you know what I mean? Like, when you talk about what can we do?
Yeah, what can we do?
The news media, the corporate news media, is the obvious enemy. Besides the people in politics. You let the people in politics fight the people in politics. They've got to carry on that fight. We are citizens. We've got to carry on a fight against our media. We have to make alternate media, and we have to let people know that the corporate media that we're seeing is 100% absolute BS. And they do not have American interests in mind. They have their own international interests, globalist interests, and that interest involves bankrupting us. And we are going to see, if they have their way, if they keep winning, in a few years, we are going to see a very strong economic collapse. And so part of fighting that would be to prepare yourself for something like that. But we're kind of in a rough. Most people don't even know they're in a fight. Most people don't even know it. They think that next year we're going to get rid of this. We're going to wear masks for 100 days, and it's going to go away, and we're going to get back to our going to the bar and partying, and everything's going to be right back to normal, and then carry on. and that's not the case. It's gonna keep going, and if they have their way, they're going to bankrupt us. Before Trump took office, at the end of the Obama administration, they were going to pass the Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement, and we would have been bankrupted by now if that was the case. The first thing that the Trump administration did was cancel that, and that's how I knew to support him, because I read that. I was in Hawaii at the time. The Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement for all the Asian countries, if you look at the details of that, we would have all been out of work in very short order. We were going to lose a lot of money. It was going to be a death nail to America. I couldn't believe that any politician would get behind that, and I was just shocked at what I saw. So when Trump got into office, mysteriously, you know what I mean, and that all of it came from behind to beat Hillary, and then he instantly killed that. That was like day one. They killed that. I thought, oh, finally the Americans are sticking up for themselves here. So here we go. And so here we are down the road. We're 4 years later, and we're going to see what happens. But I guess the only thing that we can do that would help would be to just debunk the media, fight back against them, because that's been the coronavirus on its own wouldn't have worked if it wasn't for the media, and the media wouldn't have worked if it wasn't for the corona. They had to work in conjunction with each other to slow the economy down. So it's the media. You can't kill the virus. We're not going to kill the virus. I'm not a doctor. I watch the news. I can turn that off, and I think everybody should. That's where you got to take the fight to them. If you can, fight them.
Yep. And then use your voice to tell the truth and let everybody know as much as you can. Be informed, like with good information, real information, not disinformation, research, and find other avenues to just stand up. Like, don't wear the mask. If everybody just stopped, like, what are you going to do?
If the media wasn't there, we wouldn't even know about it.
We wouldn't know about it, but it's just fear tactics. But anyway, so I will get with you and we'll figure out a new time, a new day to do a part 2 Q&A with all of
I'd
these.
love to do a Q&A. These are great people I can see in the chat room, and I would love to sit and talk to them. There's a lot of great stuff that popped up that I'd love to talk about. It's fun stuff. And awesome. I'm happy everybody was here. I'm happy to be here. It was great. Thank you. Awesome. Oh, somebody asked, like, they want to get a hold of me or wanted to read it and all this stuff. It's TonyRodrigues.com. Just like my name is spelled right there. .com. You can go to my website. There's an email there. There's links to all their old free interviews I've done. There's links to my Patreon channel, and there's links to my memory recall course that you can purchase if you feel you've been involved. So awesome. Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Yes, and I have your website in the post as well. You guys make sure to follow him on all the different social medias, and if he has a newsletter or anything website, make sure you're getting to that, because we never know about social media. If something's one word we say wrong and like they take it all away. So make sure you're connecting with every little bit that he has, that you can make sure at least one of them works. But thank you so much. And thank you, Tony. And you guys have a wonderful evening. Keep on sharing truth and being love everywhere you go. You can find me at swiftfire.org. Oh, there he comes back.
All right, I actually clicked the wrong thing.
Oh, that's okay.
I popped out, so I didn't mean to leave.
You had to go. You can also go to swiftfire.org. Please get on my newsletter for the same reason, just because, I have a strike on my YouTube. They've taken my Facebook down. They took my website down twice now.
We're in a media war here. We are in a war.
Yeah, I sent something out about the tests and the nanotechnology, 2 videos having to do with that and how to support AI, issues to shut down the robots and all of that. And mysteriously, my website got taken off at midnight that night. And so we do have it back on again. And you guys go get on the newsletters and figure that out. But thank you all. I love every one of you who are here. Thanks for spending time with us tonight and all your beautiful comments. And thank you so much. Tony will be back and look forward to our part 2. And you guys have a great evening. All right.
Okay. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.